the day. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, I move that given the grave financial situation in the province of Ontario today, the Legislative Assembly agree that the 2015 budget should include the following elements: an announcement that the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan will not be pursued as it places an enormous burden on businesses and will kill jobs in this province.
Sure will.
A commitment that a carbon tax, or its close cousin, a cap-and-trade process, not be adopted as it is a cost that Ontario residents and businesses cannot afford. A plan to fix home care by streamlining the system to reduce the number of agencies patients must deal with, and by tying community care access care funding to outcomes and clearly defined results. A commitment to reduce energy prices so that all people and businesses no longer have to be paying some of the highest energy costs in North America. And finally, a serious, credible and detailed plan to balance the budget by 2017-18.
Mr. Wilson has moved Opposition Day number 3. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, the Ontario PC caucus put forward this motion today because we're gravely concerned about the direction this province is going in under the Liberal government and very wary regarding what will be in the government's budget tomorrow. This government has a history of fiscal mismanagement and a chronic spending problem. Their years of bad spending decisions are beginning to show up in the reductions to services that we're seeing across the province. A number of weeks ago in this House, I spoke of the size of the provincial debt and gave some examples of what services were being crowded out as a result of the interest payments on the $288 billion worth of debt. I said that we believed the Liberal government could do much better in its 2015 budget than it did in 2014. And to help them to improve their fiscal performance and better deliver services, we would raise a number of key issues and suggestions to be included in tomorrow's budget. Over the last few weeks, my colleagues and I have raised 5 different issues and put forward 5 sensible solutions. We've asked the government to include them in the 2015 budget to be delivered tomorrow. Only by embracing the direction we have laid out will the province begin to turn the corner, Mr. Speaker, to stop hurting people and start on a path to a better economy that will create jobs. Again, Mr. Speaker, the five items we ask the government to commit to in its budget are, number 1, an announcement that the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan will not be pursued as it places an enormous burden on businesses and individuals and will kill jobs in this province. The Finance Ministry's own internal documents show that it will kill at least 18,000 jobs in its first year of introduction. This mandatory plan is another tax on both employers and their employees. It will mean less money today in people's pockets, which will affect their spending and ultimately affect the entire economy. The government is, yet again, trying to tell people how to spend their money. Well, Mr. Speaker, most people know they have to save for their retirement. In fact, a study by McKinsey Consulting Group reports that 83% of Canadians are already saving adequate amounts for their retirement. Any new proposal, Mr. Speaker, should be focusing on the 17% remaining who need a little bit more help with saving for their retirement. On top of all this, the government has yet to provide a definition of what a compatible pension plan might be. Who knows what will happen with existing pension plans? I urge the government to take the opportunity tomorrow to say you have seen the light and tell us you will not be going ahead with this plan. Our second ask, Mr. Speaker, is a commitment that a pay-to-pollute carbon tax or its close cousin, a cap-and-trade process, not be adopted, as it is a cost that Ontario residents and businesses cannot afford. This is merely another misguided tax which will create even more of a financial burden than people are already carrying. In the jurisdictions where it has been tried, cap-and-trade and carbon pricing have been a failure and have increased costs for all ratepayers while doing almost nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In last year's election, the Premier told the people of Ontario that she wouldn't implement a carbon tax. She should have stuck to this promise, but she does still have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to make up for what she's been saying about the tax recently and to tell the people that in tomorrow's budget that she won't go ahead with this nonsense. Our third request is a plan to fix home care by streamlining the system, to reduce the number of agencies and the layers of bureaucracy that patients must deal with by tying community care access centre funding to outcomes and clearly defined results. Healthcare providers, stakeholders, patients and their families have said the system is broken. Currently, home care services are inadequate and inconsistent. If it's this bad today, what will it be like when we have even more seniors in the system? The Donner report, a recent report issued by the government, highlighted that the two biggest issues with today's home care system is excessive bureaucracy and a lack of accountability for system outcomes. This report and these issues must be addressed, and soon. Again, Mr. Speaker, we hope these will be addressed in tomorrow's budget. Our fourth ask, Mr. Speaker, is a serious, credible and detailed plan to balance the budget by 2017-18. It's desperately needed. All we've heard on this subject to date is platitudes and numbers that don't add up. In fact, this government hasn't even been able to keep its own deficit numbers straight. Rather than reducing the deficit, as they claim, the deficit has actually been rising, going from $9.2 billion in 2012-2013 fiscal year to $10.5 billion in 2013-2014 fiscal year to this year at $10.9 billion. Dealing with a deficit has been done on a wing and a prayer, and if the province is to have a hope of turning its finances around, there needs to be a solid plan put in place immediately. Interest payments on the debt are beginning to crowd out critical frontline services like health care and education. Over the last number of weeks, we've seen 249 nurses laid off, 250 teaching positions lost in Toronto alone, and 118 teachers lost in Kawartha, to state just a few examples. And finally, we ask for a commitment to reduce electricity prices so that all people and businesses no longer have to be paying some of the highest energy costs in North America. Every time we turn around, Mr. Speaker, hydro